All right, welcome back. So today, I gotta fix my computer real quick. Uh, mm, okay, all right, I'm good. So today we are going to look at a school of thought. I guess that's probably the best way to talk about a school of thought. It is a philosophy in of itself, in the reason being that it is a way people live their lives, and again, that is essentially what philosophy is. Um, So today we're going to look at hedonism. So if you're looking at this, you're probably thinking like, "Well, what are we talking about?" But hedonism itself is very philosophical. So what do we mean by that? We mean that it invokes thought, it invokes action, and those two things are essentially the way we live our lives. We act in certain ways because we think certain things. We're going to talk about hedonism and how our modern society has turned what was once, you know, called living in the moment to YOLO, which is you only live once. So in the background, you can see different images that are things that people view as pleasurable, whether that be drinking and alcohol, smoking and tobacco, partying, sexual promiscuity. These are things that people believe that are pleasurable to the body, and we are going to talk about this in a way. Uh, how I want to explain this? We're going to discuss how these things that can be pleasurable uh, can be very dangerous if that is the only goal, pleasure, because that leads to excess. Like I think most people would agree that some of these things are good in moderation. You see any like alcohol commercials, it always says something about drinking in moderation. Maybe I'm not here to tell you what to do, tell you how to live your life, anything like that. But maybe some balance or moderation is key. Okay, so let's look at. Well, let's go ahead. So our focus is going to be how hedonism, what it was to the Greek philosophers, what it was, how that turned into what is today this idea of YOLO, living in not living in the moment, but only living once, living for the moment. There's a big difference. All right, let's go ahead. So, what is hedonism itself? Well, it is the school of thought that pleasure is the most important pursuit of mankind and the only thing that is good for an individual. Pleasure, that is. So, again, pleasure is the only good, pain is the only bad. Anything that is what is pleasurable is good, what is painful is bad. Your life's goal is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. That is hedonism in a nutshell. Now, let me say this school of thought has evolved into something that it was not at one point. We are looking at this more so in this definition, more so through the lens of modern man. We're also here in the next slide, we're going to kind of look at the history of hedonism, and we're going to see hedonism then versus now. Okay. But I do want you to think about this and really think about this. Like when I say think about it, I don't mean just hear me. I mean like really take it into consideration. What makes you feel good? You don't have to answer this to me, but just you need to think about it. What makes you feel good? Like I can tell you right now, like something makes me feel good is fantasy football. Being good at fantasy football, not just fantasy football itself, because golly, it can be a headache. But I have like this league, fantasy football. Everybody puts in $50. There's 10 people at the end of the year. Winner take all. You win $500. And week to week, man, when you're doing good, there's nothing better than fantasy football. When you're doing bad, I don't even like hearing about football. I listen to like several different fantasy football podcasts. I have one of my own. It only has 9 subscribers, but we're working on it. But it's the most fun thing to talk about. But when you're doing bad, I haven't. This past week, probably the worst week I've ever had. And I've been playing fantasy football since I guess this is the 13th year that just my league has been. Well, I guess that's when I really started. But yeah, uh, 13 years, and this is probably the worst week I've had. I haven't thought about football all day. Don't want to talk about football. This is the first time I really have. So, um, that's something that brings me pleasure. Like, I love fantasy football. I love fantasy football, but it can be both good and bad. I've lost more than I've won. Uh, I've won our championship twice, so that's $1,000. What's up, Kevin? Oh, you good, dude? I'm just recording a video. Um, what was I saying? But you can see that if I were to, let's say that it makes me feel good, I'm having a good time doing it, so I put, just load money, just tons of money into, uh, you know, into gambling. You can see how that would eventually become uh, what was once pleasurable could now become extremely painful. And that's this whole idea of hedonism itself is to maximize pleasure, minimize pain. But it's kind of paradoxical in itself because what can at one time be pleasurable can, in the same end, be very painful. Okay, so this is let's just go to the next slide and we'll kind of see how it's evolved over time. So the history of hedonism, it was taught at the Cyrenaic school in Greece. This is 4th century BC. And so when we say 4th century BC, we're talking around the same time as Socrates, as Plato, Aristotle. And so if you really look at this, you can see why like Socrates had so many problems with the Greek philosophers at that point in time. Here's some of what they were teaching. They were teaching that physical pleasures are stronger than mental pleasures. So the body is more important than the mind and the soul. Obviously, from our reading of Socrates, we've seen that he believes something very different than that, extremely different than that. They believe that knowledge is subjective. And while knowledge can be subjective in a sense, like, what's good for me may not be the best for you, but there are some things that we would agree on that, are good for everybody. Like, I think for the most part, people driving the speed limit is a good thing for everybody. Now, are there exceptions? Yeah, there's exceptions. Like, ambulance, they need to be able to drive fast. They're trying to save lives. Um, but like taking regular showers, that's something good for everybody. Wearing deodorant, that's good for everybody. Um, so while that is in of itself, uh, we say subjective. Again, we're talking about things that good for you, not good for me. Uh, you know, Variety is a spice of life. Objective is more so like this is good for everybody, or this is what everybody should know, or this is what everybody should have. Uh, Again, there is some subjectivity to the human life because people are different, and that's where tolerance and acceptance can come in. But if there is no accountability, then that's what can lead to very dangerous um, action. Think about it. Like if laws were subjective, and like you can you maybe that law's for you, but this law ain't for me. Then I mean, again, you can think about how things could really get dangerous very quickly. Uh, But there is some truth to that. Like I believe we can agree with that. There is some truth to that. The Cyrenaics also taught that pleasure should not lead to pain. You shouldn't do something that is going to lead you to being in pain later. Like, let's see, what's something like smoking cigarettes, smoking tobacco, like that may be pleasurable in the moment, but that could lead you to having health problems when you get older and be very bad for you and make your the last years of your life very miserable and could lead to an early death. So they believe that again, future pleasure is just as important as current pleasure. Now, the Cyrenaic, excuse me, that school was replaced by the Epicureans. This is about a century or two later. And even the Epicureans, like Epicurus is thought of as like the first hedonist, but this isn't the same way that we view it today. No, 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 no. The Epicureans, they taught that to seek modest pleasures, like dude, have friends, find companionship, play fantasy football if they were into that at that time. If your dog's in bed with you, snuggle up with it. Do things that make you happy, but again, things that aren't. I guess there's almost, you can kind of look at it like what brings you the most pleasure might also be the most painful. But so seek out small pleasures. Like, dude, eat something you like every once in a while. Eat dessert every once in a while if you want it. But don't do it all the time because then it's not modest anymore. They believe that the best way to find pleasure is to gain knowledge, to gain friendship, and live a virtuous life. Like if you live a virtuous life, you will be happy. I know that's hard to believe because we are, you know, our world is weird. Our culture can be weird sometimes. Like sometimes we, like idolize those that just don't take nothing, that just ruthless, do whatever it takes to get what they want. And while again, I think we all appreciate like someone with drive and initiative. Sometimes again, if there's no limits on that, it can be very bad and very painful for various people. Epicureans believe that tranquility, which is just the state of pure peace, is freedom from fear. Freedom from fear. So it is fear that makes us pain, or that brings about pain, or that gives us pain. And think about that. Like, that's what anxiety is. So, anxiety is worrying about a future that may or may not happen. That's what anxiety is. So, think about if you could get rid of your anxiety. Think about that. Think about if you could get rid of the fear that you have for the future. I'll be honest with you. Like I used to, I still do to some extent, but I used to be very afraid of like the future and what it held. Like things changing. I used to be deathly afraid of that. Like I remember. So when I was, I'll give you a little insight on me. So I really enjoy like the political I really enjoy like the political sphere. I don't necessarily enjoy politics itself, but the political sphere, like I love the way that government, I love seeing the way government works. Um, I love political philosophy. My degree from my bachelor's degrees in political science, like I do enjoy that realm. Now, I don't always enjoy the people in it. I don't always enjoy the ideas that come from different movements, but I enjoy politics because essentially it's just how people behave, and it's applied ethics. That's essentially what politics is. It's applied theory. It's theory and practice. It's applied ethics, and I enjoy that. I remember when I was in fifth grade. That was the 2000 election. And I remember that's the first election I ever remember. And I remember I was 10 years old. I was in fifth grade. And I'm like, man, I can't wait to the next election. Like, this is fun. Like, I enjoy this whole process. And then I started thinking, it's like, well, dang, you're going to be in ninth grade. Like, oh, man, you got to go through middle school and you got to be in high school. Like, oh, that's going to suck. I hate that. I don't want to do that because I was afraid of change because I liked how my life was at the time. When I was in ninth grade, the election came and went. And again, I enjoyed it. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to get to vote in my next election. I'll be 18. And then I realized it's like, oh, dang, you're going to be in college. You're going to be a college freshman. Like, that sucks. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I don't want to go to college. Like, I was afraid of the future. The next election came, 2008, got to vote in it. It was a part of it. Again, followed it closely. And then start thinking, well, dang, in 4 more years, like, what's going to be the case? You're still going to be in college? Well, for me, I was still in college. 2012 came, didn't really worry about it too much at all until I sat down and started thinking, oh, dang, man, next election, like, you're going to be out of college and like you're going to have a real job. Like, man, this could be really bad. Continuously afraid, continuously afraid. And I'm not saying that I'm not afraid now. Like, I do have fears. I have anxiety, but that freedom from fear is really what I'm trying to obtain. That tranquility, that peace. And I think we can all do that. And again, even the Epicureans were, they were preaching that. I don't know, preaching's a strong word, but they were teaching that. But The issue is that hedonism today is very different than what it was, and it's more so about pursuing pleasure at any cost. So let's take a look into hedonism then and now. So the idea of a hedonistic lifestyle would have the founder of hedonism, Epicurus, turning over in his grave. Hedonism today is more about pursuing pleasure at all costs, but the philosophy of hedonism, as described in ancient Greece, is more about living in the moment and enjoying the simple things of life. Again, when you're at the beach, like think about it, like you're at the beach, like dude, just enjoy being at the beach. Don't think about all the stuff you got going on. Don't worry about chores you got to get done when you get home. Don't worry about um, will I ever meet will I ever meet the right guy, the right girl. Don't worry about it. Like you're at the beach, just enjoy being at the beach. But you would like me. Me and my family, we would go to Disney World every single year, and I would always for like we started going out in the seventh grade. I would say up until I was probably 25 years old, probably the last time I went. Every year I went down there and just started thinking about like girl problems I was having because I was always like either talking to a girl or two, or I was dating somebody, and I would just think constantly about the problems that I was having with them. And I never enjoyed like just being at Disney World ever. I feel bad now. I really do. I feel bad for my parents for taking me and just not enjoying it because I couldn't. Because I was always thinking about something else. I couldn't just be there in the moment. And that's what hedonism used to be about, being in the moment. But now it's not. It's not about just enjoying things that are going on in your life. Now it's an excuse for doing anything in your life. Today, hedonism is an excuse for excessive drinking, for smoking, for partying, for sexual promiscuity, for gambling. Modern society has turned hedonism from living in the moment to you only live once. And when people say you only live once, like what do they mean by that? They mean by, oh well, hey, dude, I'm gonna do what makes me happy, man. Like if it makes me happy, hey, you only live once. Got to do it. If you only live once, might as well do it, right? You regret it if you don't. People say that, but that's not necessarily the best measure. I gotta turn these lights back on. Oh, come on. There we go. So, um, I wrote these notes initially when the whole lockdown started, but if you want a good example, if you want a good example, Google coronavirus spring break and just watch the kids that are there for spring break. This is like the week after, maybe 2 weeks after the whole coronavirus thing started, and schools had closed down, everything like that. If you want a good look at if you want a good look at hedonism today, just hear them out. Just hear them out. All right. Lastly, the dangers of hedonism. So, what are the dangers of it? If it feels good, why shouldn't I do it? Well, here's the reason, or here are the reasons. The paradox. The pleasure paradox. So, the pursuit of pleasure tends to have negative effects over the long run, as you see listed below. So, if you only do things that make you feel good, it may be fine in the moment, but it's going to have effects. Like there's an effect to everything that happens. Everything. So what could this lead to? It could lead to health issues. It could lead to addiction, and this is where we're going to go from here. And addiction can come in many forms, but some of the bigger ones, the more life-altering ones, are addicted to alcohol, drugs, gambling, and kind of go on from there. Can damage relationships with your family, with your friends. Can lead to baby mama issues, baby daddy issues, and it can lead to financial problems. Okay, so hedonism itself, the way it was taught, early Greek philosophy, it had its, it had its, uh, good values and bad values. Or not even, we shouldn't say good and bad, but it had its useful premises and maybe not so useful premises. Some that can be attributed as uh, as pure, some maybe not so. But what we see hedonism today is maybe why we all feel that there's something wrong with just our culture in general. Maybe this has a part to play in it. Only doing what feels good. So, um, we'll take a look at the addiction assignment. I want you to think of an addiction you have. You may think, I don't have an addiction. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. Well, good. You shouldn't. You're underage for one. But we all have things that we do just because it makes us feel good. Maybe that's, you know, I once had I still have this friend, but he was in, talking about fantasy football. He was in like 15 different leagues. That's an addiction. Maybe your addiction is your phone. Maybe it's video games. Maybe it's TV. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's fishing. I mean, you can spend way too much time fishing and not get stuff done just because it makes you feel good. So think about an addiction you have, and then we'll pick up tomorrow. See you. Where's that button?